I never meant to fall for her. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be there that night, but somehow, the universe decided that my entire life needed a plot twist in the form of Victoria Hale, the most intimidating woman in Manhattan. If power had a face, it would be hers, smooth, unreadable, and terrifyingly beautiful. And if irony had a favorite hobby, it was making me, an intern who could barely afford her subway card, the accidental third wheel in her love life. It all started at a company gala. The champagne sparkled, the city lights glowed, and I, Emily Carter, the newest PR intern at Hale Dynamics, was doing my best not to spill shrimp cocktail on my second-hand dress. I had no business being there. But my boss, Victoria's assistant, insisted I come to observe how professionals network. Her name was Rachel. She was smart, kind, and had this effortless charm that made everyone around her feel seen, including me. When Victoria entered the ballroom, the entire atmosphere shifted. Conversations dimmed, people straightened up, and even the music seemed to slow down to match her stride. She wore a black satin gown that fit like authority itself, her heels clicking with precision. And then, with that same commanding grace, she walked straight to Rachel and smiled. Not a polite corporate smile. Personal one. The kind that said there was a story behind it. I remember the way Rachel's shoulders tensed, the quick inhale she tried to hide. Something in their eyes, that flicker of familiarity and distance, told me there was history there. And then Victoria's gaze shifted to me. "Who's this?" she asked, her tone curious but laced with something sharper. "Emily," Rachel answered too quickly. "Our new intern. She's still learning the ropes." Victoria's lips curved slightly. "Welcome to Hale Dynamics, Emily. I hope you're a fast learner." Her eyes lingered longer than necessary, long enough to make my stomach twist, long enough to plant the first seed of chaos in what used to be my peaceful, ordinary life. The next Monday, everything changed. Rachel was distant, avoiding me in small, unnoticeable ways, skipping lunch, leaving early, pretending not to hear me when I spoke. I didn't understand why until I caught her in Victoria's office late one evening, her hand resting on the CEO's desk, her voice trembling. "You can't keep doing this, Vic," Rachel whispered. "It's not fair." Victoria leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "What's not fair? That I still want you? Or that you still want me?" Rachel turned away, but not before I saw the pain in her eyes. That was when I realized they weren't just colleagues. They were something else. Something messy, and I was standing in the middle of it. By week 3, Victoria started calling me into her office more often. Sometimes for work, sometimes for something else. She'd ask about my ideas, compliment my insights, then steer the conversation somewhere dangerously personal. "You're different from the others," she told me once, her gaze fixed on me as the city lights blinked behind her. "You don't try to impress me. You just are." I didn't know how to respond. All I could think was how her voice dipped lower when she said it, how her perfume, a mix of sandalwood and rain, seemed to wrap around me. Rachel noticed the change immediately. "Be careful with her," she said one night as we rode the elevator down together. Her voice was quiet, but her warning was sharp. "Victoria doesn't do feelings. She does control." I wanted to believe her. I did. But there was something magnetic about Victoria, the way she carried her pain like armor, the way her eyes softened when she forgot to guard them. And before I could stop it, I was falling. The breaking point came during a business trip to San Francisco. The three of us, Victoria, Rachel, and me, were there for a product launch. It should have been routine. Instead, it turned into the most emotionally charged 3 days of my life. The tension between them was palpable, like a storm waiting to happen. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands, every unspoken word between them felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to witness. But the real shock came that night after dinner, when Victoria asked me to walk her back to her suite. "Rachel and I used to be together," she said suddenly as we reached her door. "You've probably figured that out." "I guessed," I murmured. "She left because she couldn't handle me," Victoria continued, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "But she still loves me. She just doesn't know it." I swallowed hard. "And you? Do you still love her?" Victoria looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, "I don't know. Maybe I'm trying not to." The silence stretched. The air felt thick. I should have walked away. But when she reached for my hand, I didn't pull back. And that was the moment everything changed. The next morning, Rachel avoided me entirely. She knew. Of course she did. The guilt burned through me like acid. But so did something else, the ache of wanting someone I shouldn't. Victoria didn't make things easier. She treated me differently, more possessive, more attentive, like she'd decided I was hers now. But behind every touch, every lingering glance, I could feel the ghosts of her and Rachel's past haunting the room. One night I found Rachel crying in the stairwell. "You think you're special," she said bitterly when she saw me. "You think you're the first person she's made feel seen. But trust me, Emily Victoria only loves herself." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But the truth was I didn't know if she was. And yet amidst all that pain, something unexpected began to grow. Not between Victoria and me. Not anymore. Between Rachel and me. It started small, shared silences, late-night talks, quiet empathy born from mutual heartbreak. I saw a different side of her, not just the efficient assistant who kept the world running, but the woman underneath, brave and gentle in ways Victoria never allowed herself to be. And somewhere in that fragile space between grief and forgiveness, love began to take root. Victoria Hale had a way of entering a room like she owned the air inside it. Even when she wasn't speaking, you could feel her presence, sharp, deliberate, and suffocating in the most intoxicating way. But after that night in San Francisco, something about her changed. She was quieter, colder, like she'd realized too late that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The morning after, she barely looked at me. Rachel didn't either. The silence at breakfast was unbearable. 3 women at the same table, each pretending to be okay, each breaking in a different way. When the plane took off back to New York, I pressed my forehead against the window and watched the clouds drift beneath us, feeling like I had left a version of myself somewhere over the Pacific, one that was naive enough to believe that love could survive this kind of chaos. Back at the office, the world kept moving as if nothing had happened. Campaigns launched, clients called, deadlines loomed. But under the glossy rhythm of corporate life, our triangle pulsed like a quiet, dangerous heartbeat. Victoria became more distant in public, curt, professional, unreadable. Yet when her eyes met mine, there was still a trace of that night in them. The kind of look that said, "I remember everything, even if I wish I didn't." Rachel, on the other hand, avoided her completely. She rearranged her schedule so she never had to be in the same room with Victoria. And when she spoke to me, her words were clipped, polite, but hollow. I tried to tell myself that what happened between me and Victoria didn't matter, that it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But then came the Friday evening when Victoria called me into her office after everyone had left. Her tone was casual. "Emily, close the door." I obeyed, my heart pounding. She didn't look up from her laptop when she spoke. "You've been quiet lately." "I've been busy," I said softly. "Busy avoiding me?" I froze. "I'm not avoiding you." Finally, she looked up, her blue eyes steady, unreadable. "Good. Because I don't like being avoided." There was something about the way she said it, not a threat, not exactly, but a command wrapped in longing. "Victoria," I started. "What happened in San Francisco was inevitable," she interrupted. "You felt it too." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I didn't feel anything, that it meant nothing. But lying to her felt like lying to myself. So instead I whispered, "It shouldn't have happened." Victoria stood and walked toward me, every step deliberate. Maybe not. But it did. When she reached me, she didn't touch me, not right away. She just stood there, close enough that I could feel her breath against my skin. "You make me feel something I haven't felt in years," she said quietly. "And that terrifies me." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time I saw not the CEO, not the power, but the woman beneath it, lonely, fragile, human. And that was exactly why I couldn't stay. "I can't be part of this," I whispered. "Not when Rachel," her eyes darkened. "Rachel made her choice." "But did you?" I asked. The question hung between us, unanswered. That night I walked home through the city, the wind cold against my cheeks, my mind spinning. I kept replaying her words, her voice, the pain in her eyes. And then, like fate mocking me, I saw Rachel standing outside my apartment building. She looked exhausted, her coat wrinkled, her hair falling loose around her face. When she saw me, her expression softened, but there was a war behind her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. We went up to my apartment, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The air felt thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "She told me," she said. "About you. About what happened." I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm sorry." She let out a shaky breath and sank onto the couch. "Don't be. It's not your fault. Victoria has this way of pulling people in. You think you're the one in control, but you're not." I sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "You loved her." "I did," she admitted. "Maybe part of me still does. But I also know she'll never love anyone the way she loves her own ambition." Her voice trembled, and suddenly the wall she built began to crack. I reached out instinctively and she let me. "She doesn't see people," Rachel whispered. "She sees mirrors, reflections of what she wants to believe about herself. That's why I left." "And yet you stayed working for her." Rachel laughed softly, bitterly. "Because I couldn't quite let go. Because some part of me hoped she'd change." Her eyes found mine, then tired, honest, full of something I hadn't expected. "Understanding." "I know what you're thinking," she said quietly. "You think you can fix her. But she doesn't want to be fixed." I didn't deny it. I couldn't. "I don't know what I want anymore," I confessed. "Then start with this," Rachel said. "Want something that doesn't hurt you." The words hit me harder than I expected. We sat there in silence after that, the kind that feels like a truce. The city hummed outside, the night stretching between us. And somewhere in that quiet, something fragile shifted. For the first time since everything began, I felt safe. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I began to rebuild a strange kind of friendship. We had breakfast together sometimes, shared stories about work, complained about clients, laughed about ridiculous office gossip. It was easy. Easier than I expected. Victoria, on the other hand, became unpredictable. One day she'd be warm, almost tender. The next, she'd be distant and dismissive. She noticed that Rachel and I were getting closer and she didn't like it. "Is this a rebellion?" she asked one afternoon during a strategy meeting, her voice laced with ice. "My assistant and my intern bonding over shared grievances?" Rachel kept her face calm. "We're just working, Victoria." Victoria smiled tightly. "Of course you are." When the meeting ended, she called me into her office again. "Whatever this is with Rachel," she said coldly, "don't let it interfere with your work." I looked at her, anger rising in my chest. "You mean don't let it interfere with you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, Emily." "No," I said, surprising even myself. "I'm done being careful. I'm not yours. And neither is she." For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped. The pain behind her eyes flashed, raw and brief. "You think you understand me," she whispered. "But you don't." "Then let me go," I said softly. "Let us go." She didn't answer. She just turned away, her reflection cold in the window glass. And that was the moment I knew we were done. That night, Rachel and I met at a small cafe near Central Park. It was raining lightly, the kind of gentle drizzle that makes the world feel softer. "I think I quit today," I said, stirring my coffee. Rachel smiled sadly. "Yeah? How'd it feel?" "Like freedom," I said. "And heartbreak." She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "That's how you know it's real." For a moment we just looked at each other, really looked. And in her eyes I saw everything Victoria couldn't give me. Honesty, warmth, and quiet strength. When she smiled, something in my chest unraveled. And just like that, the love story I never expected began, not with a spark, not with fire, but with a gentle exhale. A beginning born from the ashes of something that almost destroyed us both. In the weeks that followed, Victoria tried to pretend she didn't care. She threw herself into work, into control, into being the version of herself the world expected. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at Rachel from across the office, a flicker of regret, gone too soon. Rachel and I didn't flaunt what we had. It was quiet, private, sacred. It wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about finding peace. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Rachel and I walked through Central Park, our fingers brushing, our laughter mingling with the city's hum. "Do you ever think about her?" Rachel asked softly. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not the way I used to." "She'll always be part of our story," she said. "Yeah," I agreed. The part that taught us what love isn't. Rachel smiled, her eyes warm in the fading light. And maybe that's how it's supposed to be. The first snow of December came quietly that year, soft flakes falling against the skyline, coating the glass towers of Manhattan in fragile white. By then I hadn't seen Victoria Hale in nearly a month. I'd resigned from Hale Dynamics 2 weeks after that last confrontation. I'd packed my desk in silence, ignoring the whispers, the curious glances, the tension that hung like static in the air. Rachel helped me carry my box of things down the elevator. When the doors closed, she reached for my hand. "No regrets?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Only the ones I learned from." Outside, the city roared around us, taxis honking, snow turning to slush on the pavement. The chaos of New York, always alive, always moving forward. And somehow in that noise I felt calm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't caught in someone else's gravity. I was standing on my own ground. Rachel and I started spending more time together outside of work. It began innocently: coffee on Sunday mornings, walks through Central Park, helping each other rewrite resumes and figure out next steps. But somewhere between laughter and late-night talks, friendship blurred into something more. It wasn't like falling for Victoria, all heat and danger and uncertainty. This was different. Softer. Steadier. The kind of love that didn't demand but offered. One evening we were sitting on my couch, a movie playing unwatched in the background, when Rachel said quietly, "Do you ever feel guilty? About how everything happened?" I turned to her. "Sometimes. But then I remember none of us were happy where we were." She nodded slowly. Victoria wasn't built for love. She was built for control. And we kept mistaking one for the other. I hesitated. "Do you still think about her?" Rachel smiled sadly. "Every day. But not because I miss her. Because I finally understand her." "What do you mean?" "She's scared," Rachel said. "Of being seen. Of being loved without condition. That's why she keeps everyone at arm's length, even herself." I thought about that for a long time. And she was right. Victoria Hale was the kind of woman who built empires out of her own loneliness. A few days before Christmas I got a call. "Emily Carter?" a familiar voice said. "It's Victoria." I froze. I hadn't heard her voice since I quit. "I hope I'm not intruding," she continued, her tone clipped, professional but softer than I remembered. "I wanted to ask if you'd meet me. Just once. No business. Just closure." I hesitated, every instinct screaming that it was a bad idea. But some part of me, the part that still carried the ghost of her, said yes. We met at a rooftop bar overlooking the city. The wind was sharp, the lights below flickering like stars. She was already there when I arrived, dressed in a long gray coat, her hair loose for once, her usual armor missing. "Hi," I said carefully. She smiled faintly. "Hi." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You look happy." "I am," I said. "I think I finally learned how to be." She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her glass. "That's good. You deserve that." There was a pause, long enough for the unspoken to rise between us. The memories, the mistakes, the longing. Finally she said, "I wanted to apologize." I blinked. "For what?" "For everything," she said simply. "For using you to fill the silence. For making you think you mattered to me in a way that was fair. You did matter, just not in a way I knew how to handle." Her honesty hit me like a wave. I'd imagined this conversation 100 times, but never like this, never with her sounding human. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you think." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Rachel's good for you." My heart stuttered. "How?" "She still checks in sometimes," Victoria said. "Not about work. Just small things. Weather. Holidays. She's trying to forgive me." "She already has," I said. Victoria's gaze lifted to meet mine. "And you?" "I think I forgave you the moment I stopped trying to understand you," I said gently. "You were never the villain in my story, Victoria. Just the lesson." For the first time, her composure cracked a tiny exhale that might have been a laugh, or a sigh, or maybe the sound of something breaking. "You always had a way of cutting through my walls," she murmured. "I suppose that's why I kept you close." "Maybe," I said. "But I think you kept me close because you wanted to believe love didn't have to hurt." She looked at me, then really looked, and in her eyes, I saw the woman she could have been if she'd ever let herself be free. Take care of her, she said softly. Rachel. She deserves peace. So do you, I replied. She didn't answer. She just turned toward the skyline, her profile carved against the city lights, a woman made of brilliance and loneliness, finally standing still. That was the last time I saw her. Christmas came and went quietly. Rachel and I spent it together in my tiny apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies. At midnight, she leaned her head on my shoulder. You okay? I smiled. Better than I've been in years. She reached up and brushed a stray snowflake from my hair. You know, she said softly, I used to think love was supposed to hurt. That if it didn't break you a little, it wasn't real. And now I think it's supposed to heal what's already broken. Her words settled in the quiet between us. And before I could say anything, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't the kind of kiss that sets the world on fire. It was the kind that steadies it. The kind that tells you you're home now. The months that followed were a slow unfolding of peace. Rachel started her own consulting firm, small but promising. I joined a creative agency, finally writing stories that weren't about power or manipulation, but about truth. Sometimes, when the city quieted at night, I'd think of Victoria not with bitterness, but with a kind of bittersweet gratitude. Because without her, I never would have found the version of myself who knew how to choose love that didn't demand suffering. Rachel once told me, some people come into our lives like storms. They destroy, they shake, they tear us open. But when the rain stops, what's left is fertile ground. And that's exactly what she became, the quiet after the storm. A year later, on a crisp spring morning, I found myself back at the Hale Dynamics building. I wasn't there for work, just curiosity. A ghost visit. The lobby had changed, new designs, new staff, but the air still carried that sharp, efficient energy. As I turned to leave, I heard someone call my name. Emily. It was Victoria. She looked different, softer somehow. The same tailored elegance, but her smile was genuine this time. I didn't expect to see you here, she said. Just passing by, I replied. You look well. I am, she said. I took a break for a while. Therapy, travel. Tried to learn how to exist outside the boardroom. That's good, I said. And I meant it. She studied me for a moment. You're still with Rachel? Yes. Good, she said quietly. She always brought out the best in people. There was no bitterness in her tone this time. Just peace. As we stood there, two women who had once been each other's undoing, I realized something. This wasn't the end of a love story. It was the end of an old version of ourselves. She reached out her hand and I took it. A brief shake. Quiet goodbye. When I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden on my face. Later that evening, Rachel and I sat by the river, watching the city lights ripple across the water. She's doing better, I said softly. I'm glad, Rachel replied. Everyone deserves a chance to start over. I turned to her. Even us. She smiled. Especially us. I laughed, leaning into her shoulder. The city hummed around us, 1,000 stories unfolding at once. And for the first time, I realized our story wasn't about heartbreak or power or pain. It was about survival. About choosing love, not the kind that burns, but the kind that stays. The kind that lets you breathe again. That night, as the stars flickered faintly above the skyline, Rachel whispered, Do you ever think we were meant to meet like that? In the middle of all that chaos? Maybe, I said, smiling. Maybe the universe had to break us a little just to make us fit together. She laughed softly. That sounds like something you'd write. Maybe someday I will. She kissed me again, and the city fell away, the noise, the lights, the past. All that remained was warmth, and the quiet certainty that we had finally found our way home. A year later, I published my first book, Between Power and Tenderness. It wasn't about Victoria. Not entirely. But it carried her shadow in the spaces between the words, the reminder that love isn't always gentle, but it can teach us gentleness. When I sent Rachel the first copy, she wrote me a note back. You turned pain into art. That's the most powerful kind of victory. And maybe she was right, because in the end, I didn't just survive that love triangle. I grew from it. Victoria taught me passion. Rachel taught me peace. And somewhere between them, I finally learned what it meant to love myself. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.